I think that one of the real joys of reading classic literature is how it can allow you to see how many things, how many parts of what we think and feel and how we live our lives remain consistent across time. How you can read a text that is 1 or 2 or 300 years old, or much older even, and in it you can find things that will resonate with your own experiences in life. You get moments or sometimes even entire texts where when you're reading it, it feels like on the timeline between when this text was written and where you are living your life today, that space in between just collapses because you know exactly what that character is going through, or there's just a little quirk of the language, a description of a scene or a feeling or an idea that strikes you as true for yourself, regardless of the time that has passed since those words were written. And of course, what is more timeless and universal than love? So today, for Valentine's Day, I'm going to read through a handful of my favorite passages from some 19th century literary texts that describe love and all that goes along with it in a way that rings very true to me. And we're going to kick it off with some sonnets. We'll start with Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who wrote Sonnets from the Portuguese, the most famous of which definitely is How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways. But for her love poetry, I am very fond of Sonnet 14. If thou must love me, let it be for naught except love's sake only. Do not say, I love her for her smile, her look, her way of speaking gently, for a trick of thought that falls in well with mine and certes brought a sense of pleasant ease on such a day. For these things in themselves, beloved, may be changed, or change for thee, and love so wrought may be unwrought so. Neither love me for thine own dear pities wiping my cheeks dry. A creature might forget to weep who bore thy comfort long and lose thy love thereby. But love me for love's sake, that evermore thou mayst love on through love's eternity. I think that this sonnet is this really lovely expression of the hope that your partner will love you unconditionally, or that their love will change with you as you change throughout the years. I especially love those lines describing the idea that if this love began at a time when I was low and sad and needed your comfort and you provided it and we fell in love through that, that hopefully my kind of healing and moving beyond that won't remove your affection for me. That, how does she say it? A creature might forget to weep who bore thy comfort long and lose thy love thereby. That if your love for me is contingent upon your being able to provide me this strength and comfort, that as soon as you have provided me enough strength and comfort to heal, then I might lose the love that I value so much. So it is this sonnet of, I hope our love will last the test of time. I hope our love is unconditional. But there is this kind of core to it, this like specificity and vulnerability about the expression of that hope for unconditional love that I find very compelling. I love Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poetry because she's a beautiful writer, but I have to admit that part of the reason I feel so tender towards her love poetry is because of the knowledge I have of her life and of the love in her life, because Elizabeth Barrett Browning was married to Robert Browning, who was also a poet. And in fact, they met because after Elizabeth Barrett at the time, published her first volume of poetry, Robert Browning read it and was just completely enamored of her writing. And he wrote her a letter to tell her that he was in love with her poetry. And they arranged to meet. And once they met, they fell in love, not just with each other's writing, but with each other. And they eloped because her father wouldn't approve of her marrying anybody. And I just think that knowing that about the love poetry that each of them wrote just brings an extra level of enjoyment for me. And so the next 19th century literary love text I would like to read from is one of Robert Browning's poems about Elizabeth Barrett Browning. This is also a sonnet. It is entitled Now, and this might make me blush a little. Out of your whole life, give but one moment. All of your life that has gone before, all to come after it, so you ignore, so you make perfect the present. Condense in a rapture of rage for perfection's endowment, thought and feeling and soul and sense, merged in a moment which gives me at last, you around me for once, you beneath me, above me, sure that despite of time future, time past, this tick of our lifetime's one moment, you love me. How long such suspicion may linger. Ah, sweet, the moment eternal, just that and no more, when ecstasy's utmost we clutch at the core, while cheeks burn, arms open, eyes shut, and lips meet. I mean, I'm just saying, I think they had a happy marriage. It's definitely a little steamy, but even outside of that, I think that poem just captures this feeling of wanting to crystallize one single moment, of feeling so close with the person you love and just having everything in the world wrapped up in that person, so that nothing in the past or the future, including your past or future self and your lover's past or future self, none of that even exists in your conception of what's happening. It's just everything distilled into the feeling of closeness and emotional intimacy and just belonging together. Now we're going to move from 19th century love poetry into descriptions of love in 19th century novels. And I'll start with one passage that is one of my favorite passages from this book. This is a passage from the beginning of Anna Karenina. And this novel, of course, has beautiful descriptions of the love and the passion that Anna and her lover Vronsky feel for each other. But this passage that so resonates with me is from before that affair even begins, from the beginning of the novel, when Levin has arrived in Moscow with the intention of proposing to the woman he loves, Kitty. And he has made his way to the place where he knows that she is ice skating, and he can't bear to keep himself away from where she is. But he's also so nervous to be around her because he doesn't know if she feels the same way about him that he does about her. And it reads as follows. He knew she was there by the rapture and the terror that seized on his heart. She was standing, talking to a lady at the opposite end of the ground. There was apparently nothing striking, either in her dress or her attitude. But for Levin, she was as easy to find in that crowd as a rose among nettles. Everything was made bright by her. She was the smile that shed light on all around her. Is it possible I can go over there on the ice, go up to her, he thought. The place where she stood seemed to him a holy shrine, unapproachable, and there was one moment when he was almost retreating, so overwhelmed was he with terror. He had to make an effort to master himself and to remind himself that people of all sorts were moving about her and that he too might come there to skate. He walked down, for a long while avoiding looking at her, as at the sun, but seeing her as one does the sun, without looking. It's that imagery of the person you love as the sun which you can't bear to look directly at, but which you are unavoidably aware of, that just gets me. It just sticks in my mind. There is just something that seems so pure about it. It feels almost like middle school to me, of that feeling of being just so nervous, and you know that your crush is in the room, but you're afraid to look at them. But even though you can't stare directly at them, you know exactly where they are in relation to everyone else, and you just feel their presence. There's another very simple and sweet, but I think timeless and evocative description of what it feels like to be in love that comes out of Madame Bovary. In this passage, Emma, Madame Bovary herself, who is a character who really yearns for more out of life. She yearns for more fine things, more happiness, and especially more passion. She is in this moment in the early stages of a new love affair. The text tells us that at the beginning of this affair, they had this beautiful 3-day long honeymoon period, and this is how they spent those 3 days. They would sit in the low-ceilinged room of a tavern that had black fishing nets hanging over its door. They ate fried smelt and cream and cherries. They laid down in the grass. They kissed in unfrequented spots beneath the poplars. They would have loved to live forever, like a pair of Robinson Crusoes, in this tiny place, which seemed to them in their beatitude the most splendid place on earth. This was not the first time they had seen trees or blue sky or grass, nor the first time they had heard water flowing or the breeze rustling the leaves of the trees. But certainly these things had never before filled them with such wonder. It was as if nature had never existed before, or as if she had only become beautiful with the fulfillment of their desires. Again, it's very simple, but there's just something fundamentally true about it. And similar to the passage from Anna Karenina, it even almost feels juvenile in a positive way, as in the feeling of experiencing these intensities for the first time. The sky seems bluer, the water sounds more melodious. Sometimes reading a book in translation like Anna Karenina or Madame Bovary makes me a little bit sad, because I know that I'm not reading the actual book. There's always something changed in translation. But with those two passages from those two books, it's not exactly the language that I think makes the ideas so resonant. It's just the idea itself and the recognition of how constant those feelings and ideas are across centuries, that coming up into a room where your crush is will always make you nervous, and that being in the early stages of being in love will always cast a golden haze on everything else around you and make everything seem more beautiful and enjoyable. So even though I feel a little regret at not being able to read those words as Flaubert and Tolstoy originally inscribed them, I still feel like I get it, you know? And now, of course, I must talk about my Brontes, because I cannot talk about love in 19th century literature without talking about Emily and Charlotte. Anne is a very talented writer as well, okay? But as far as descriptions of the passions of love go, it's Emily and Charlotte. We'll start with Jane Eyre. And this book contains quite a few very powerful descriptions of love, quite a few that make a mark on their reader. But for me, my favorites are Jane's first declaration of love and the final description of what their life together has been like. Her first declaration, I love so much, partly just because I love this character. I love Jane Eyre, and she's so stubborn and she's so cranky sometimes. You know, she's so opinionated and she's feisty. And the moment when she finally expresses her feelings for Mr. Rochester, it's because he has kind of goaded her into it. She's telling him that she's going to leave him, and he is almost taunting her to the point that she finally makes the unspoken explicit, and she tells him why it is that she has to go and why it is that this conversation is so impossible for her. "I tell you I must go," I retorted, roused to something like passion. "Do you think I can stay to become nothing to you? Do you think I am an automaton, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my morsel of bread snatched from my lips and my drop of living water dashed from my cup? Do you think, because I am poor, obscure, plain, and little, I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart, and if God had gifted me with some beauty and much wealth, I should have made it as hard for you to leave me as it is now for me to leave you. I am not talking to you now through the medium of custom, conventionalities, nor even of mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, just as if both had passed through the grave, and we stood at God's feet, equal as we are." And then once all of this plot has happened, and spoiler alert, but reader, she marries him, we get her description of what life together has been like after they've been married for a decade. She says, "I know what it is to live entirely for and with what I love best on earth. I hold myself supremely blessed, blessed beyond what language can express, because I am my husband's life as fully as he is mine. No woman was ever nearer to her mate than I am, ever more absolutely bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. I know no weariness of my Edward's society. He knows none of mine, any more than we do of the pulsation of the heart that beats in our separate bosoms. Consequently, we are ever together. To be together is for us to be at once as free as in solitude, as gay as in company. We talk, I believe, all day long. To talk to each other is but a more animated and an audible thinking. All my confidence is bestowed on him. All his confidence is devoted to me. We are precisely suited in character. Perfect concord is the result." I love each of those passages on their own, but especially I love the two of them together. This kind of arc from starting with this overflowing passion and this intensity, this almost obsession with each other, and then over the course of a life together, coming to this state of contentment and increasing love, but without the same urgency maybe that there was at the beginning, without the same desperation, instead being used to each other, not in a inured to each other, not in a taking each other for granted kind of way, but just in the sense of being at peace together, talking constantly, being together constantly, and never being weary of each other. That progression just feels so true to me and feels so nice. I just think it's very nice. Much less nice, but every bit as compelling, are the descriptions of love in Wuthering Heights. I don't feel that it was an unfair spoiler for me to have revealed that Jane Eyre does end up with Rochester in the end. The plot of Wuthering Heights is a little bit more insane, and so I will say, if you haven't read this book before, you should really read it before you listen to this, because I cannot talk about the descriptions of love within this book without revealing events within this book that definitely startled me as a first-time reader. So if you want to preserve your own ability to be startled by this book, skip ahead until I'm done talking about it. Through Cathy and Heathcliff, Emily Bronte manages to just capture the most insane and raw passion that is love, but it's love that is closer to obsession. It's unhinged. I can't get enough of it. Cathy says about him, "He is more myself than I am. Whatever souls are made of, his and mine, are the same." And then she goes and marries another man, and it is absolutely insane. And I love it. Shoot it into my veins. Whatever drugs are in this book, when Cathy has died, the passage describing Heathcliff's reaction to that. Unfortunately, it is a very beautiful description of the force of love. He is in so much grief over losing her that he is infuriated with her. He says, "May she wake in torment. She is a liar to the end. Where is she? Not there, not in heaven, not perished. Where? You said you cared nothing for my suffering, and I pray one prayer. I repeat it till my tongue stiffens. Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then. The murdered do haunt their murderers. I believe, I know, that ghosts have wandered on earth. Be with me always. Take any form. Drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. Oh God, it is unutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul." It's this completely feral, self-abnegating, all-consuming desire to just lose yourself in the person you love, to remove everything else, to sacrifice anything else, just because the only thing that matters in the world is the love that you have. It's toxic, it's dangerous, it's destructive. I love this book so much. Now, as this video draws to a close, I know what you're thinking. You're talking about descriptions of love in 19th century classic literature. Where is Jane Austen? And I know, okay? I'm half agony, half hope. One word from you will silence me on the matter forever. If I loved you less, I may be able to talk about it more. I know. She's got some really good lines. And I really do think that Jane Austen writes really beautiful romance, that the relationships in her novels are very beautiful and very believable, with the exception of the cousin fucking one, which I refuse to read. But to me, the relationships in them are less about these intense passages. There aren't really blocks of text, descriptions, passages of dialogue that strike me and stick with me in Austen's novels. For me, the romance and the realism of love in her novels is more about small moments, like Mr. Tilney knowing the concerns women have about fabric and loving the same women's fiction as Catherine Morland does. Or it's about actions that aren't necessarily rooted in passages of the text, like the fact that we learn over time how Mr. Darcy has made efforts to change the things about himself that Lizzie Bennet rightfully criticized. And very often, the romance and the realism of love in her novels is more about what's unsaid than what is said. In Persuasion, which I love so much, we get to read Captain Wentworth's letter. I am half agony, half hope. But we don't get to hear the conversation when Wentworth and Anne Elliot reconcile and renew their vows of love. What Jane Austen so often does is she kind of leads you right up to that moment of confession and then glosses over it in a way that puts it on you to fill in the blanks and to imagine what two people who have gone through the journeys that we have seen in such detail might say and do in those moments. And so the beauty of the romance in these climactic moments in Austen is almost about the negative space around the writing of love, even more than it is about what it actually happens on the page. And I love that, but it doesn't result in the same kinds of passages as Stick With Me from Anna Karenina and Madame Bovary and, you know, the sonnets of Elizabeth Barrett and Robert Browning. All of these sentiments in each one of the texts that I have read from in this video, I think they are so beautifully and poignantly expressed in the text within which they were written, and that they just hold so true now today, that they feel just as fresh and accurate and meaningful in the 21st century as they did in the 19th century. And again, that's really just what reading the classics is all about to me. So I hope you have a happy Valentine's Day, or a happy whatever day it is when you are watching this. And if you have romantic love in your life today, I hope that it is more in the style of the Brownings than the Brontes. Which seemed to them in their beatitude the most spent. I've never actually heard the word pronounced.
Beatitude.
Beatitude.
Beatitudes.
I hate it. Beatitudes.